Hey folks, it's Uncle Jay, and I am here with the winds of change's own armed liberal, Mark Danziger.
A toast to everybody out there.
We are in the lovely capital city, Obamatown. It's a beautiful. I'm calling it fall, dude. This can't
Whatever
be
it
summer
is,
anymore.
I gotta
It's
tell you,
gorgeous.
it makes the East Coast almost livable.
Almost. Well, what we want to talk about today, and this is something that strikes right at home for Mark, is Afghanistan. There's a lot going on. Apparently, General McChrystal dropped his report on Monday to the Department of Defense on up through the chain of command to Commander-in-Chief. And it doesn't sound like it's all that positive a report about what's going on in Afghanistan. Now, the question is, what's going to happen next? Now, first of all, your oldest son, just deployed to Afghanistan.
He left a couple of photos. My favorite is in Kandahar. There's a roller hockey rink and a patisserie, and he managed to get pictures of both of those on his way out of town.
I got to ask, what is a patisserie? I don't even know.
It's a French bakery, and so there's a certain, there's a certain humor, and there's probably some giant global question about, like, if you can, in a Stone Age country, if you're bringing those sorts of resources over, are your soldiers so isolated from the population that can they really do much?
Seriously, I mean, there's always a base mentality. There's always the Fobbit mentality that says you're in the rear with the gear. You have to have all the obscene amenities.
Right, Burger King and
William Arkin. But the bottom line is, I think the point being, and what McChrystal has said, and what makes the only sense of operating there is a population-centric, get off the bases, get out, and live among the people.
Right.
And we're doing that, and that is why this has been the most dangerous. Last month was the most deadly month for U.S. forces, I think, in the entire time we've been there.
Yeah, it is. And I think, clearly, my kid is out, in the boonies. I mean, I could barely find where it stand on Google Earth. I mean, and so it's, it's definitely out there. But I think, there's also...
We should mention he's a paratrooper with the 82nd Airborne.
There you go.
All the way. But
in seriousness, I mean, there's also been a whole series of discussions. Andrew Exum, who I know is not your necessarily favorite.
Abu Muki, I like him. He's a good guy. I just think he's a little overly relied on as a strategic genius.
Okay, but you got to go with the Lego terrorist on the header of his blog.
That is cool.
But Abu Muki, about a week or two ago, ran a whole 7-day series on, like, why are we in Afghanistan? What's it for? What's it about?
Right.
And it was interesting to me, obviously. It's not like I'm obsessing about it or anything. But what I read there actually caused me a lot of concern. And what causes me a lot of concern is that everybody I talk to talks about Afghanistan kind of qua Afghanistan, like what's our strategic interest in Afghanistan as a country, right? And to be honest, if you're not a heroin addict in New York City, I'm not really sure what America's strategic interest in Afghanistan as a country really would be.
They have the coolest old piles of rocks in the world.
There you go. But it's very, I think, hard to defend in that context. And so if the administration or the senior military leadership gets wrapped up in the idea of defending Afghanistan as a strategic outpost, right, I think it's going to be real challenging. And I think they're going to have a hard time. I think clearly there are justifications for being there. Right. And I think clearly my kind of mantra in all this, and I've said this publicly since like 2002 or 2003 when I was smacking Bush for it, is somebody at the top, meaning somebody who lives like within 2 miles of where we're sitting right now, needs to get on TV and explain what the hell we're doing there and what the strategic logic is and what the goalposts look like. And, until that comes down from the top, it's really challenging to do anything except go play whack-a-mole. And I know that...
That's really a bad idea, but it has to be part of a broader strategy.
That's the whole point. You think there's something that we're trying to get to. Oh, yum. Hang on.
This is good, incidentally. We should mention that we're at Art and Soul, which is a trendy southern cooking restaurant in D.C. And we ate here last night. The food was awesome.
Great. It's great. Awesome. Big plug for the restaurant.
Yeah, definitely.
So in seriousness, though, I think from my point of view, I look at this and I sort of go, what's it about? What's it for? And I was lucky because Craig Mullaney, who's the guy who did the Minutes Full Measure or something was the name of his book, who's now like the deputy undersecretary of something for Afghanistan. He's like another one of these young muckety-mucks.
Right.
Did a book tour, and I got to go have lunch with him in the course of his book tour. And I got to ask him, point out, I said, What are we doing there? My kid's going to go there in like 2 months.
Right.
Why? And he made a very good, if I think overly narrow argument. He basically said, look, obviously the key is maintaining stability in Pakistan. Right?
They have nukes.
They have nukes. They have a big army. There's a lot of people in Pakistan. Clearly, it's maintaining and limiting the strategic influence of Iran. And to the extent that we can split off the very small number of truly kind of deranged, crazy Islamists from the fundamentalist sort of general population in Afghanistan, who are fundamentalist Muslims but aren't crazy, right? And we can give them the space to sort of put down roots and build sort of a basic civil society. Then we buy time for problems to hopefully get better in Pakistan, which matters a lot to us.
Right. And my answer to that was I don't see any reason to believe things are going to get better in Pakistan. But I agree with the rest of his argument in that the justification for being there is to try and give Islamic, or the non-Islamists, the non-Taliban Al-Qaeda, well, and even I would say some of the Taliban. There are moderate Taliban.
Right, there are.
As bizarre a concept as that is, and we have to give them a reason to look to us as an ally, as someone who can help them build a decent living, as opposed to someone who is simply killing bad guys and their tribal members.
Right.
That's been our policy for way too long. It's not a sustainable strategy in that area. It hasn't worked, and it will never work.
The reality is that strategy, they grow bad guys faster than we can kill them. And that doesn't lead to sort of a net positive result. I mean, the thing that worries me, though, about even this is, clearly we got a strategic interest in Pakistan because they got nukes, and we don't want them to nuke India, or we don't want their nukes to wind up on a container ship in Long Beach Harbor. But at the same time, I think for whatever reason, and I don't understand why, like, the mainstream folks don't talk about it, and whether it's just that I'm just flat wrong, right, which is certainly a possibility. But my point of view on this has kind of been for a long time, there's a small, crazy group who are trying to take over the Islamic world, right? And there's a whole interesting history of these guys, from Qutb, who has this sort of modern, and there's all these interesting ties to sort of modern Western philosophy and a bunch of other sort of stuff, right?
Used to rationalize ancient philosophy.
But these guys basically, sort of grew up into the Muslim world starting around the turn of the 19th to 20th century. And they're crazy. I mean, there's no other word for it. They're crazy and evil, because their basic model is that they'll kill whoever they need to kill who's between them and happiness. And they believe...
Happiness being submission. And a caliph.
And it's not a real plausible kind of political philosophy. And the reality is that a lot of the Muslim world is badly wounded. They live in these horrible tyrannical states. They've got these sort of rapacious, fucked up dictatorships where the dictators are just, man, hey, give me another year so I can put another $100 million in the bank in Switzerland.
I'm like, my retirement fund's not done yet.
That's right. And I'll just put the boot heel down a little harder on the people. And the people are pissed off and they're unhappy and they want change. And these guys have been the only people who've ever been able to effectively deliver change for them. Yeah. And the nightmare to me is that what these crazy, very few people deeply believe somehow becomes mainstream within Islam. Now, I'm not a Muslim.
It's more mainstream than it should be. Now, if you look at polling on this within the Ummah, it is 20% of them believe that violent jihad is okay and a good idea and even an obligation.
Now, the good news is that of those 20%, the number who are actually willing to do something about it is really small.
Okay, as a percentage, not as a number.
But as an absolute number, it's a big enough number.
It's a too big, scary number to me.
It's a big enough number to pay attention to. And so the question to me is, you look at Afghanistan as sort of a piece in a much larger conflict. And
it's an object lesson as to how we're going to interact with those people.
That's right.
And